भगोने को फेंक दूंगा उठाकर और खा जाऊंगा उस मोटे कबूतर को। या! अब मैं तुझे खाऊंगा मोटा कबूतर। नहीं नहीं, मुझे मत खाओ, मेरे छोटे छोटे बच्चे हैं, वो मेरे बिना भूखे मर जाएंगे। लेकिन मैं तो तुझे खाऊंगा मोटा कबूतर, मुझे बहुत तेज भूख लगी है। अरे बाबू जल्दी आ यहाँ और ये देख, एक बिल्ली हमारे कबूतर को पकाना है खाने के लिए। क्या? आता हूँ। चल आजा मोटा कबूतर, ये ले बिल्ली। अरे बाप रे, काट लिया। अरे बाबू जल्दी उस बिल्ली को भगा, नहीं तो वो बिल्ली उस कबूतर को खा जाएगी। रुक जा बिल्ली, मत खा मेरे कबूतर को। तूने मुझे काटा कबूतर के बच्चे, अब मैं तुझे छोड़ूंगा नहीं। चल आ इधर, बचाओ बचाओ बचाओ, अरे कोई तो बचाओ मुझे इस बिल्ली से, ये मुझे खा जाएगा। अरे बाबू बिल्ली ने उस कबूतर को पकड़ लिया, मेरे कबूतर को छोड़ दे बिल्ली, उसे मत खा, वो मेरा कबूतर है। चल अब तुझे मजे लेकर खाऊंगा। मुझे छोड़ दो, मेरे बच्चे भूखे हैं वहाँ उस पेड़ पर, वो मेरे बिना मर जाएंगे। भूख लगी है और मम्मी अभी तक नहीं आई खाना लेकर, मुझे कीड़े खाना है। थोड़ी देर और इंतजार कर ले भाई, मम्मी ढेर सारे कीड़े पकड़ कर लाती होगी, लेकिन कब आएगी, बहुत तेज भूख लगी है। अगर मैं उड़ पाता तो खुद ही कीड़े पकड़ कर खा लेता। पता नहीं मम्मी कहाँ चली गई, बहुत देर हो गया अभी तक नहीं आई वो। मैं जा रहा हूँ कीड़े पकड़ने नीचे। नहीं नहीं मत जा भाई, मम्मी ने मना किया है हमें नीचे जाने के लिए, नीचे कुत्ते और बिल्ली घूम रहे हैं, वो हमें खा जाएंगे। अबे बिल्ली, वो कबूतर मेरा है, उसे मुझे दे दे, नहीं तो मैं तुझे पीट दूंगा। नहीं दूंगा, ये मोटा कबूतर मेरा है, इसे पहले मैंने देखा था और अब इसे पहले मैं ही खाऊंगा। मुझे छोड़ दो, मेरे बच्चों के पास जाने दो मुझे। अरे बाबू वो बिल्ली तो हमारे कबूतर को लेकर बहुत तेज दौड़ रही है, हम दोनों नहीं पकड़ पाएंगे उसे। मेरे पास एक उपाय है, तुम उस तरफ से जाकर आगे से घेरो बिल्ली को, मैं पीछे से घेरता हूँ उसे। ठीक है, जाकर आगे से घेरती हूँ उसे। भाई वहाँ नीचे देख, वहाँ जमीन पर एक मोटा कीड़ा चल रहा है, उसे खाने के लिए नीचे मत जाना भाई, नीचे बहुत खतरा है, कुत्ते बिल्ली तुम्हें पकड़ लेंगे। उस मोटे कीड़े को देखकर मेरे मुंह में पानी आने लगा, मैं तो उसे खाऊंगा। नहीं नहीं नीचे मत जा भाई उस मोटे कीड़े को खाने के लिए, मैं तो जाऊंगा पेड़ पर से उतरकर धीरे धीरे नीचे। अरे बाबू बिल्ली कहाँ चली गई, यहाँ तो आसपास कहीं दिख ही नहीं रही है। अरे चिंकी, वो बिल्ली हमारे कबूतर को यहीं लेकर आई थी भागकर, जरूर वो कहीं छुप गई है, जल्दी जल्दी ढूंढो उसे, जरूर हमारे कबूतर को वो बिल्ली कहीं छुप कर खा रही होगी। बचाओ बचाओ, ये बिल्ली मुझे खा जाएगा, बचाओ। चुप कर मोटा कबूतर, वो दोनों लड़के यहीं पर है, वो सुन लेंगे और तुझे पकड़ कर पका के खा जाएंगे। लेकिन तू भी तो मुझे खाने वाला है। सही बोला, तू मेरे ही पेट में जाएगा, अब चिल्लाना मत। अरे बाबू उस नीले ड्रम में से किसी का धीरे धीरे आवाज आ रही है। लगता है बिल्ली उसी में कबूतर को खा रही है बैठकर। चुपके चल देखते हैं उसके अंदर चिंकी। कोई तो बचाओ मुझे इस बिल्ली से। चुप कर मोटा कबूतर, नहीं तो तेरा मुंह तोड़ दूंगा। बिल्कुल आवाज मत करना चिंकिया, मैं 1 से 3 तक गिनूंगा और 3 बोलते ही हम एक साथ हमला करेंगे बिल्ली पर। ठीक है, गिनो। पता नहीं मेरे बच्चे कैसे होंगे वहाँ उस पेड़ पर, वो भूख से तड़प रहे होंगे। तुझे निपटाने के बाद तेरे बच्चों को भी निपटाऊंगा। क्या? मुझे पता है वो उस पेड़ पर रहते हैं। 1 2 3। ये बिल्ली तो यहीं छुपी हुई है बाबू। बिल्ली अब तू कहाँ बच के जाएगा हमसे? बचा लो लड़कों मुझे इस बिल्ली से, ये मुझे खा जाएगा। भागो! पकड़ बाबू, फिर से भागने लगी बिल्ली। अरे भाई नीचे मत
coast. It's a whole lifestyle. People like to live in these types of vans or RVs. I always tried to keep out of the big cities and stick to small towns for camping in between destinations, but for the most part, I like to camp out in the backcountry. Being in the middle of the woods with nobody else around was where I found myself most comfortable. I think part of it is that it always felt safer to be out by yourself in the forest than it was to be stealth camping in a busy parking lot in the middle of a city. Don't get me wrong, it can still get creepy at night, but I always knew I was better off out there with nobody around. This week, I was slowly traveling between two big cities in Washington. I was taking my time, staying on the back roads and hunkering down at campsites for several days at a time. On this day, I pulled off the road and onto a small dirt trail going deep into the forest. There were a few pull-off spots, but none were taken, and it looked like nobody had been down here in a while. So I kept going, hoping to secure a larger and more scenic spot. At the end, there was a large circle to turn around in. It wasn't scenic, just surrounded by trees, but it was large and secluded and peaceful. It even had a stone circle in the middle for a campfire. I leveled out my van and parked. Since it was the middle of spring, it was raining pretty much every day here in Washington, so there wasn't much for me to do outside. I opened the side door for some fresh air while I cooked a meal on my propane stove. It was around sunset, so I still had several hours before I'd be in bed. Over the next 30 minutes, the sun fell past the horizon and the rain started picking up. I shut the door to keep the water out and instead cracked open one of the small windows near the back of the van. I sat on the bed and watched a show on my laptop. But midway through it, a glare came in from the open window behind me. It was a light reflecting onto the screen. Before I was able to react, it went away. It didn't move away, though. Turned off as if someone had switched a light off. When I turned around and looked out the window, I saw nothing. It was really dark and still pouring down outside. I had no way to know how far the light came from or what it even was. Being on a trail with other pull-off spots, I had to assume it was just another camper. Maybe their headlights found their way through the trees and shone into my window, and then they quickly turned their vehicle off. The only problem with that was the light didn't come from the road I came down. Behind my window was just trees. Maybe there was another trail I didn't know about. There was a good 2 or 3 minutes where I didn't hear anything aside from the rain and thunder before there was suddenly something outside the sliding side door. It sounded like bending plastic, like someone was leaning against it. Then there was a knock. A few seconds later, they knocked again. Even though I was sure they knew I was in here already, I was still too scared to speak. Maybe they weren't sure how many people were inside or if I was a man or a woman. So, I felt safer not giving them anything and just staying quiet. A very disturbing and anxious 5 minutes went by as the knocking continued every few seconds without anyone saying anything. They had to be drenched by now and probably couldn't see at all in this weather. But then they finally said something. "Sheriff's Department. Open up." What? I didn't believe that for a second. If it were true, why wouldn't they have said that from the beginning? They continued knocking and calling out different lines, all basically stating that they were an officer and I needed to open the door. This seemed like a desperate attempt to get me to open up without violence. I slowly lifted the window cover and looked out. All I could see was a dark figure moving near the door, but from the shape of it, it didn't look like he had any sort of law enforcement gear on. So, I was sure this was about to get really bad. I debated in my head what to do for 30 seconds as the knocking got more and more impatient, before I decided to risk it. I scrambled into the driver's seat to try and drive away. As soon as I got up there and turned the key, I heard 2 sets of footsteps running up to the side of the van. I began pulling out just as a figure appeared in the window next to me. Thank God the van didn't get stuck and I was able to get out onto the trail. As I drove away, I never saw any other vehicle down the road, which makes the intentions of those unknown people likely really disturbing. I put in a report with the county, who of course said no officers were out there that night. But I never got any follow-up. Things could have gotten really bad out there. But I haven't had anything else happen since then. Scene end.